Be me 28, leading a dev team at a solid mid-tier software company. Not one of the big-name giants, but what we build actually matters. Salary's strong, the problems are interesting, and for a long stretch we were spared most of the usual corporate theater. A big part of that was our manager, Herman, guys from another era, late 50s or so. Started out as a programmer back when everything was raw and unforgiving. No fancy tools, no layers of abstraction, just logic, hardware, and whatever skill you brought to the table. His management style was simple. Hire people who are good at their jobs, give them what they need, and get out of their way. And our department, the core engineering team, was his masterpiece. There were 5 of us under him. A junior dev, a real eager kid who was learning fast, a QA engineer, meticulous guy who could find a bug in a rock, another senior dev, a solid coder. And then there was Bernard. Bernard was on another level. He was the quietest person I've ever met. You could go a whole day without hearing him say more than 10 words. He'd just sit there, headphones on, in a state of pure focus. Some people in other departments thought he was weird or maybe arrogant. They were wrong. Bernard was the load-bearing pillar of the entire company's technical infrastructure. I'm not exaggerating. The complex architecture that our entire platform ran on, he designed and built most of it. The legacy code that no one else dared to touch, he understood it like he wrote it himself. He was a wizard. I remember a time, maybe a year before the trouble started. It was about 2 a.m. on a weekend. A critical system failure took down our main product. Total panic. The on-call guys were scrambling, the executives were losing their minds, millions of dollars were potentially on the line. I was called in, the other senior dev was called in, everyone was in a panic on a conference call. We spent an hour trying to diagnose the issue, getting nowhere. The logs were a mess, nothing made sense. Then Herman's voice cut through the chaos on the call. "Everyone, stop what you're doing, I'm calling Bernard." A few minutes of silence. Then a new name popped into the call. Bernard. He didn't say hello. Herman just said, "Bernard, we're dead in the water. Can you take a look?" We heard a single keyboard click. That was Bernard's yes. For the next 15 minutes, the only sound from his end was the faint rhythmic tapping of keys. No questions, no, "What have you tried so far?" No complaints. Just pure surgical work. We all just sat there, listening. It was like watching a master at work. Then the tapping stopped. Bernard spoke for the first time. His voice was calm, matter of fact. "It's fixed. A third-party API updated their authentication protocol without notice. I patched it." We checked. Everything was back online. Perfect. Herman just sighed in relief. "Bernard, you're a lifesaver. Thank you." "No problem." And he disconnected from the call. That was Bernard. No ego, no need for praise. Just competence. Our team ran on respect for that competence. We were a real brotherhood. We knew who did what, and we trusted each other to do it well. We didn't need forced fun or synergy sessions. Our synergy was a perfectly functioning product, built by professionals. We'd go for a beer after work sometimes, just the guys. Bernard would even come along occasionally. He wouldn't say much, just sip his drink and listen. But he was part of the team, our part of the team. We understood him. Performance over platitudes. This was our peaceful kingdom. And then the dragon arrived. It started with an all-company email from the CEO subject line. Exciting new leadership announcement. We were getting a new director of people and culture. The email was full of the usual corporate buzzwords. "We are thrilled to welcome Angela to the team. Angela brings a wealth of experience in transforming workplace cultures, fostering holistic, inclusive, and forward-thinking environments." My eyes glazed over. It sounded like we'd hired a professional memo writer. Herman saw the email and just grunted. He told us, "Sounds like we're about to spend more time on PowerPoints. Just keep your heads down and keep shipping good code." That was his solution for everything. Ignore the noise, do the work. It had always worked before. A week later, Angela held her first all-hands meeting. She walked up to the podium with a bright, fixed smile. She was dressed in that specific style of empowered corporate woman. Sharp blazer, expensive-looking minimalist jewelry, an air of absolute certainty. Her speech was exactly what we feared. It was a 30-minute avalanche of jargon. She talked about deconstructing traditional power structures, about moving away from cold, results-driven metrics, about creating brave spaces where employees could bring their whole selves to work. She said her goal was to make the company less of a workplace and more of a family. I looked over at my team. Every single one of us was staring blankly, trying not to roll our eyes. My job is my job. My family is my family. I don't want them to be the same thing. But the worst part was when she started talking about her audit of the company culture. She said she'd identified pockets of resistance to a more emotionally intelligent workflow. And as she said this, her eyes swept across the room and landed squarely on our department, on our little island of quiet, focused engineers. In her eyes, we weren't the engine of the company. We were a problem, a nest of toxic masculinity. I could feel the shift in the atmosphere. After the meeting, Herman pulled us aside. His face was grim. "Okay, listen up. This is a new game. I want you all to just try and play along. If they ask you how you're feeling, just say motivated. Whatever you do, don't give her a reason to target us." We all nodded. We respected Herman. If he was worried, we were worried. The changes started small. First, it was the mandatory Monday morning check-in. Every team had to start their week by sitting in a circle, and each person had to share their emotional state and their goals for personal growth for the week. It was excruciating. Our team, which usually started Monday with a quick, efficient 10-minute stand-up about technical blockers, now had to spend 45 minutes listening to people from marketing talk about their weekend yoga retreat. When it was our turn, we just mumble something generic. "Feeling good. Goal is to close out my tickets." When it got to Bernard, he'd just say, "I'm fine. My goal is to work." The first time he said it, Angela, who was observing our meeting, scribbled something in her notepad. You could see the disapproval on her face. His efficiency was an insult to her process. Next came the optional after-work events. They were never really optional. There was a company spirit karaoke night, a wellness seminar on mindfulness, a team-building escape room challenge. Our team politely declined most of them. We had work to do. We often stayed late to solve real problems. We didn't have time for forced fun. Bernard, of course, declined all of them. He'd just reply to the calendar invite with a simple no. No excuse, no apology. Just a statement of fact. He would not be there. Angela started to fixate on him. He was her white whale. In her mind, he was the personification of everything she was hired to destroy. The quiet, hyper-competent male who didn't perform emotional labor for her. He didn't want to be part of her family. He just wanted to do his job and do it better than anyone else. This was, to her, the ultimate act of defiance. One afternoon, Herman got an urgent meeting request from Angela. He came back to our area an hour later, looking like he'd aged 5 years. He closed the door to his office and called me and the other senior dev in. "She's building a case against Bernard," he said, rubbing his temples. "A case? For what? For doing his job?" I asked. "For not being a team player, for creating a non-inclusive environment with his silence, for, and I quote, exhibiting behavior consistent with toxic, avoidant masculinity." I just stared at him. It felt like we were in a different reality. "What did you tell her?" "I showed her the metrics," Herman said, his voice laced with frustration. "I showed her the uptime reports. I showed her the data on how many critical projects he's single-handedly saved. I told her that Bernard's contribution to this company could be measured in the millions of dollars." And what did she say? Herman let out a bitter laugh. She told me that focusing on his output was problematic. She said, "It's not about what he does, it's about how he makes others feel." She said his silence is intimidating to more collaborative team members. It was insane. She was actively arguing that competence was a negative trait. That being the best at your job was a problem if you weren't also the loudest and smiliest person in the room. Herman told us he fought for him. He tried to explain that different people work in different ways, that you can't force an introvert to be an extrovert. He said trying to reason with her was like trying to explain color to a person born blind. She operated on a different level, one based on ideology, not reality. Her conclusion was that Bernard was a cultural liability, and he either had to change or he had to go. "So what now?" I asked. "For now, I've bought us some time," Herman said. "I told her I would coach him, but she's watching. She's looking for any excuse. I need you guys to try and cover for him. Try to include him in conversations, even if he doesn't respond. We just have to play the game. We tried. We'd explicitly ask for his opinion in meetings. He'd give a short, concise, and brilliant answer, and then go silent again. We'd invite him to lunch every day. He'd politely decline, preferring to eat at his desk and solve a problem. None of it worked. Angela's new initiatives kept coming. The worst was the peer feedback program. It was an anonymous system where you could give feedback on your coworkers, but it wasn't about work performance. The questions were things like, does this person contribute to a positive team atmosphere? Does this person make you feel heard and validated? Rate this person's enthusiasm for company values. It was a system designed to punish people like Bernard. It rewarded social butterflies and punished quiet workers. It was a tool for enforcing conformity. Angela presented the first round of feedback results in a manager's meeting. Herman told us later that Bernard's scores were, predictably, in the red across the board. He had dozens of anonymous comments, clearly from people outside our department who didn't understand him. Bernard is unapproachable. He never says hello in the hallway. I feel like he doesn't respect my input because he never talks. Never mind that his technical input saved their projects on a weekly basis. That was irrelevant. He didn't smile enough. Angela used this data as a weapon. She told Herman that Bernard was now officially on a performance improvement plan, APIP, for the best engineer in the company. The irony was staggering. The PIP had nothing to do with his actual performance. His tasks were absurd. Goal 1. Initiate casual conversation with at least 3 non-technical colleagues per day. Goal 2. Share a personal story or feeling during the Monday check-in. Goal 3. Actively participate and show enthusiasm during one after-work team-building event. Herman showed the plan to Bernard in private. He expected Bernard to get angry, to quit on the spot, but Bernard just read it with his usual stoic expression. He looked at Herman. "Do you want me to do this?" he asked. Herman looked defeated. "I want you to keep your job, son. Just try, please." And so Bernard tried. It was one of the saddest things I've ever seen. Watching this brilliant mind, this genius engineer, being forced to perform social tricks like a circus animal. He'd awkwardly walk up to someone from marketing and ask them about the weather. The conversation would die in 10 seconds. It was painful for everyone involved. During the Monday check-ins, he would force himself to say something personal. "I watched a documentary this weekend." Angela would watch him, her pen tapping on her notepad, a smug look on her face. She wasn't trying to improve him. She was trying to break him. She wanted him to submit to her authority, to admit that her way of thinking was superior to his. He even went to one of the after-work events. It was a company trivia night at a loud bar. Our whole team went, just to support him. He sat at the table with us, looking deeply uncomfortable in the loud, chaotic environment. He didn't drink. He just sat there, nursing a glass of water. Angela came over to our table, her smile dripping with condescension. "Bernard, I'm so glad you could make it. See, this is what being a team player is all about." Bernard just looked at her, his expression unreadable, and gave a slight nod. He was doing what was asked. He was ticking the boxes on his absurd PIP. But in his eyes, you could see that he wasn't there. His mind was somewhere else, probably working through a complex algorithm. He was enduring it. That was all. This went on for a few weeks. It felt like the whole department was walking on eggshells. The atmosphere was poisoned. We spent more time worrying about Angela's mood and her latest initiative than we did about our actual work. Productivity started to slip. Bugs that would have been caught early were making it to production. Why? Because the time we used to spend on deep focus work and collaboration was now filled with mandatory social rituals. Herman was constantly in meetings, defending our department, defending Bernard. He was fighting a losing battle against an enemy that didn't care about logic or results. Angela was building her empire, one HR policy at a time, and Bernard was her test case. If she could break the most valuable employee in the company, she could break anyone. Everyone would fall in line. The final nail in the coffin was an incident with a new project. It was a huge company-wide initiative, and our team was responsible for the core technology. There was a big kickoff meeting with all the department heads. Angela decided that this project needed a new, collaborative approach to development. she introduced a concept called ideation workshops. Instead of engineers designing the system based on technical requirements, we would all sit in a room with markers and sticky notes and dream together. It was a disaster. The project managers and marketing people were drawing pictures of clouds and writing vague buzzwords on sticky notes. Synergy, user delight, paradigm shift. The engineers, meanwhile, were trying to ask concrete questions about database architecture, API latency, and security protocols. Angela kept shutting down the technical questions. "Let's not get bogged down in details," she'd say. "Right now, we're in the blue sky thinking phase." Bernard sat through the first 2-hour workshop in complete silence. He just watched. At the end of the meeting, the project manager, a guy who was clearly trying to suck up to Angela, turned to Bernard. "Bernard, you've been very quiet. We haven't heard from you. Don't you have any ideas to contribute?" It was a trap, a public challenge. Angela turned and stared at him, a predatory gleam in her eyes. The whole room went quiet. Bernard looked at the whiteboard, covered in meaningless sticky notes. Then he looked at the project manager, and he spoke. "Your proposed timeline is impossible. The architecture you vaguely described can't handle the required load. It will fail on day one. The entire approach needs to be reevaluated based on technical reality." It wasn't an attack. It was a simple statement of fact. It was the most valuable contribution made in that entire meeting. But he had broken the rules. He had punctured their blue sky balloon with the sharp needle of reality. He hadn't been positive or collaborative. He had been right. The project manager stammered, flustered, but Angela just smiled, a cold, triumphant smile. She looked at Bernard and said, "Thank you, Bernard, for that. Feedback. We'll be sure to take it under consideration." Her tone was chilling. I knew, right then, that it was over. He had given her the excuse she needed. In her world, being publicly correct was a greater sin than being privately incompetent. He had challenged her process, her authority, in front of everyone. He hadn't played the game. He had told the truth. And for that, he was going to be punished. The next day, Herman was in back-to-back meetings with Angela and the CEO all morning. The atmosphere in our area was thick with dread. We all knew what was coming. We tried to work, but we couldn't focus. We just kept looking at the door to Herman's office, waiting for the axe to fall. Bernard, however, was a picture of calm. He sat at his desk, headphones on, writing code, as if it were just another day. Maybe he knew it was coming and had already accepted it. Or maybe he was just so focused on his work that the corporate drama didn't even register. Either way, he was a rock in a sea of anxiety. Around lunchtime, an email went out from Angela. Subject: mandatory department meeting, 2 p.m. This was it. It was happening. We got to the conference room a few minutes before 2 p.m. The mood was funereal. No one spoke. We just filed in and took our seats. The room was one of those sterile, glass-walled boxes designed to make you feel important while you're being laid off. Angela was already there, sitting at the head of the table. She had a folder open in front of her and a pen in her hand. She looked completely calm, almost cheerful. Next to her, to my surprise, was the CEO. He was a numbers guy, usually invisible, someone you only saw at quarterly presentations. His presence meant this was big. He wouldn't look any of us in the eye. He just stared at a point on the wall behind us. Herman sat at the opposite end of the table from Angela, his shoulders slumped. He looked like a man who had lost a war. The rest of us sat on one side, a silent row of condemned men. Bernard took the seat next to me. He pulled out his phone and started reading something, completely unfazed. I couldn't tell if it was incredible self-control or if he just genuinely didn't care about the corporate theater. At exactly 2 p.m., Angela cleared her throat. The sound was like a gavel. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice smooth and professional. "I've called this meeting to discuss the future of the department and the company's core values." She paused, making eye contact with each of us in turn. When her eyes met mine, I felt a chill. There was no empathy there, just ideology. "As you know," she continued, "we are striving to build a more collaborative, inclusive, and emotionally resonant workplace. A culture where every employee feels safe, valued, and heard. This requires a commitment from everyone to participate fully in the life of our corporate community. She was reading from a script, not literally, but the words were so polished, so devoid of real meaning, they had to be rehearsed. It was a speech designed to provide a justification for what she was about to do. To frame it not as a personnel issue, but as a noble step toward a brighter, more harmonious future. In any process of transformation, there can be friction, she went on. Sometimes, an individual's working style may not align with the forward-facing direction the company is taking. This isn't a matter of fault, but a matter of fit. I glanced at Herman. He was just staring at his hands, clasped on the table. The CEO was still studying the wall, a portrait of pure cowardice. He was letting his HR director do the dirty work he didn't have the stomach for. It has become clear that there is a significant misalignment within this team, Angela said, her voice taking on a sharper edge. A resistance to the collaborative spirit we are trying to foster. And then she turned her full attention to Bernard. He didn't even look up from his phone at first. I nudged him gently with my elbow. He glanced up, his expression neutral. Bernard, Angela said, and his name hung in the air. We have had multiple discussions about your role on this team. We have provided coaching, feedback, and a clear plan for improvement. She opened the folder in front of her. The feedback from your peers indicates that you are unapproachable, that your communication style is exclusionary. Your PIP goals, which were designed to help you integrate with the team, have been met with only the barest minimum of compliance. She was twisting everything. His quiet efficiency was exclusionary. His attempt to follow her insane rules was minimal compliance. Furthermore, she said, her voice dripping with authority, at the project kickoff meeting yesterday, your contribution was not collaborative. It was disruptive. You publicly undermined the creative process and created a negative atmosphere at a critical brainstorming stage. I wanted to scream. He hadn't been disruptive. He had been the only sane person in the room. He had tried to save the company from a multi-million-dollar mistake born from their creative process. But she had reframed his competence as a behavioral flaw. It was a masterclass in corporate gaslighting. This company values psychological safety above all else, Angela declared, and your persistent refusal to engage emotionally and collaboratively creates an environment that is, frankly, unsafe for your colleagues who value open communication. I looked at my colleagues. We all felt perfectly safe with Bernard. We felt unsafe with her. Bernard just looked at her. He didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He just let her talk. It was as if he was watching a strange documentary about an alien species. His silence seemed to infuriate her more than any argument would have. She wanted him to fight. She wanted him to get angry, to prove her right. He denied her the satisfaction. Therefore, she said, leaning forward and closing the folder with a sharp snap, after careful consideration, we have made the difficult decision that this is no longer the right place for you. Your employment with this company is terminated, effective immediately. The words hit the silent room like a physical blow. Even though we all knew it was coming, it was still a shock to hear it said out loud. To see this act of incredible stupidity carried out with such self-assured conviction. The CEO finally moved. He coughed awkwardly and addressed Bernard for the first time. Bernard, we appreciate your contributions. Security will escort you to your desk to gather your personal belongings. We wish you the best in your future endeavors. It was the most pathetic boilerplate dismissal I'd ever heard. Angela looked around the room, a triumphant gleam in her eyes. She was daring us to challenge her. She expected us to be cowed, to be afraid for our own jobs. She thought she had just made an example of Bernard. She had no idea what she had really done. Bernard blinked slowly. He put his phone in his pocket. He stood up. He didn't look angry. He didn't look sad. He just looked done. He looked at Herman and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. A nod of understanding, of thanks for trying. Then he turned and walked out of the conference room without another word. A security guard, who had been waiting outside, fell into step behind him. The door clicked shut, leaving the six of us in a heavy, suffocating silence. Angela smiled. It was a thin, tight smile of victory. "All right," she said, her voice bright and jarring. "Now that we've addressed that, we can begin the process of rebuilding this team's culture on a foundation of trust and collaboration. I'm excited to—" She was cut off by Herman. He had been sitting motionless, but now he slowly, deliberately pushed his chair back. He stood up. He was a tall man, and his shadow seemed to fall over the whole table. He looked directly at Angela, and for the first time, I saw real fire in his eyes. Not anger, but a cold, hard finality. "No," he said. His voice was quiet, but it echoed in the silent room. "Excuse me?" Angela asked, her smile faltering. "No, you're not rebuilding anything," Herman said. "You've just taken a wrecking ball to the most productive, most efficient department in this entire company." He looked over at the CEO. "I've worked here for 15 years. I have never, ever seen a decision this catastrophically stupid. You've just fired the man who has single-handedly saved your platform from collapse more times than I can count." The CEO squirmed in his seat. "Now, Herman, this was a cultural decision." "Culture?" Herman cut him off with a bitter laugh. "You want to talk about culture? Our culture was excellence. Our culture was respect for talent. Our culture was getting things done. You've replaced it with this, with feelings and buzzwords, with punishing competence because it's not enthusiastic enough." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the rest of us. "I cannot, in good conscience, lead a team in an environment where the best engineer is fired for being quiet, where results are less important than performing for HR." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his company ID badge. He slid it across the polished table. It stopped right in front of Angela's folder. "I resign," he said, "effective immediately." Angela's face went pale. Her triumphant smile was gone, replaced by a look of stunned disbelief. She stared at the ID badge as if it were a scorpion. The CEO's jaw was literally hanging open. "Herman, don't be hasty. We can talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about," Herman said. "I will not be a part of this. I'm going to pack my things." He turned to leave. And that's when I knew what I had to do. My loyalty wasn't to this company, not anymore. My loyalty was to the man who hired me, who trusted me, and who had just stood up for what was right. My loyalty was to the quiet genius they had just thrown away. I stood up. All eyes turned to me. "I'm with Herman," I said. My voice was steadier than I expected. Bernard was the core of this team. Herman was its leader. Without them, there is no team. There's just a collection of people waiting for projects to fail. I explained it simply, for the benefit of the two clueless executives at the end of the table. The amount of institutional knowledge that just walked out that door is irreplaceable. The workload is about to become impossible. The quality of work will plummet. I am not interested in being the person who has to explain why everything is constantly on fire from now on. I took off my own ID badge and placed it on the table next to Herman's. I resigned too. Angela looked like she had been slapped. The CEO was starting to look physically ill. He had thought this was a simple, clean firing. Now his entire senior engineering team was imploding. Before Angela or the CEO could even respond, the other senior developer stood up. "He's right," he said, gesturing at me. "My entire workflow depends on Bernard's architecture. Herman is the only manager in this place who actually understands what we do. There's no reason for me to stay. I'm out." He added his badge to the growing pile on the table. 3 badges, a neat little stack of defiance. Angela looked like she was malfunctioning. Her corporate script didn't have a page for this. She looked at the 2 remaining team members, the junior dev and the QA engineer. Her expression was a mixture of panic and threat, a silent command to stay seated. It didn't work. The junior dev stood up. He was a young guy, only a couple of years out of college. He looked nervous, but determined. "Herman gave me my first job," he said, his voice quiet but clear. "Bernard mentored me. He taught me more in 6 months than I learned in 4 years of school. Everything I know about being a good engineer, I learned from him. If he's not good enough for this company, then I'm not either." He took a deep breath and put his badge on the pile. "I resign." The pile was now 4 badges high. Angela's face was a mask of cold fury. The CEO looked like he was about to have a heart attack. He was stammering, This is unprofessional. You can't all just..." But he was interrupted by the last man, the QA engineer. He was a quiet, methodical guy, much like Bernard in some ways. He stood up, adjusted his glasses, and looked at Angela with an expression of clinical disappointment. "My job is to ensure quality," he began, his voice precise and calm. Bernard wrote code that was virtually bug-free. He made my job easier and made the product better. He prevented problems. You have just removed the single greatest quality assurance asset this company had. He paused, letting his words sink in. From a purely logistical standpoint, my workload is about to increase by an order of magnitude. The number of bugs reaching production will skyrocket. The product will degrade. The customers will be angry. I have a professional reputation to maintain, and I will not attach it to the inevitable decline that will follow this decision. He carefully placed his badge on the very top of the pile. I also resign, and that was it. The entire team. Gone in less than 5 minutes. We all just stood there for a moment. Herman gave us a look. It was a look of immense pride, of gratitude. We had held the line. We had stood by our own. Then, without another word, we all turned and followed Herman out of the conference room. I took one last look back. Angela and the CEO were still sitting at the table. They were staring at the pile of 5 ID badges. Angela was white as a sheet, her mouth slightly open in a silent O of shock. The CEO had his head in his hands. They were completely, utterly alone in their glass box, surrounded by the ruins of the department they had just destroyed. As the door closed, I could almost hear the sound of the servers beginning to catch fire. She thought she had made an example of Bernard. She was right. She had shown us exactly what the company now valued, and we had all decided that we wanted no part of it. We were walking out into the main office area, past the rows of cubicles. People were staring at us. They had seen Bernard get escorted out by security. Now they were seeing the entire engineering department walking out together, led by their manager. The rumor mill was about to go into overdrive. We got to our desks. Bernard was already gone. His desk was completely bare, except for his monitors and his keyboard. It was like he had never been there. A ghost. The security guard was standing awkwardly nearby, clearly unsure of what to do now that his one job had multiplied by 5. Herman turned to us. "All right," he said, his voice now calm and steady, like a captain giving orders. "Just pack up your personal effects. Anything important. Don't make a scene." We all nodded and got to work. It didn't take long. None of us were the types to have a lot of personal clutter on our desks. A few books, a coffee mug, a picture of a dog. As I was putting my things in my box, my phone buzzed. It was a text message from Bernard. I opened it. It was only 2 words. "Thank you." I smiled. I typed back a reply. "We've got your back. Always." A few minutes later, we were all packed up. 5 cardboard boxes, full of the last remnants of our time at that company. We walked together towards the exit. People were openly staring now, whispering to each other. No one tried to stop us. As we walked past Angela's glass-walled office, I saw her on the phone. She was pacing back and forth, gesturing wildly. She looked terrified. The reality of what she had done was finally starting to sink in. We pushed through the front doors and stepped out into the afternoon sun. We were all jobless, but we were free. We stood there on the sidewalk for a moment, 5 guys with boxes. Herman looked at us, a real smile on his face for the first time in weeks. "All right," he said. "Who wants to get a beer? First round is on me." We all cheered. It felt good. It felt right. We had no idea what we were going to do next, but we knew we were going to do it together. We had made our choice. We had chosen loyalty and competence over ideology and incompetence. And the company? Well, the company was about to learn a very, very hard lesson. A lesson about what happens when you remove a load-bearing pillar. The whole house was about to come crashing down. And we wouldn't be there to fix it. We walked to a small pub a few blocks away. The kind of old-man bar with dark wood and worn-out stools. A place that valued a good drink over trendy decor. It felt appropriate. We all piled into a booth in the corner, our 5 boxes of personal belongings sitting on the floor like luggage for a trip we hadn't planned. Herman came back from the bar with a tray of beers. He handed them out, then raised his own glass. "To unemployment," he said, with a wry smile. We all raised our glasses. "To unemployment," we echoed and drank. The first sip tasted like freedom. For a few minutes, we just sat in silence, processing what had just happened. The shock was wearing off, replaced by a strange mix of anxiety and exhilaration. Then the junior dev, the kid, broke the silence. "So, what do we do now?" he asked, looking around at all of us. It was the question on everyone's mind. Herman took a long drink from his beer and set the glass down firmly. "First," he said, looking at each of us, "I want to thank you, all of you. What you did in there, that was integrity. That was loyalty. That doesn't happen much anymore. You stood up for one of your own and for what's right. I'll never forget that." We all mumbled our thanks. We knew he meant it. "Second," he continued, leaning forward, "we don't panic. We are a complete, high-functioning software engineering team. We have a lead architect, 2 senior devs, a junior, and a QA specialist. We're managed by someone who understands the tech." He was talking about himself, but he said it as a matter of fact, not ego. "A team like this is a unicorn. Companies spend millions trying to build what we already have." He was right. The hardest part of any tech venture is finding the right people. We had the people. We were all sitting right there in that booth. It was the other senior dev who said it first. "We should start our own thing," he said. "A consultancy, or our own product." A spark lit up in the room. The idea was both terrifying and incredibly exciting. We started talking, the words tumbling out faster and faster. We could build custom software for clients. We could do security audits. We could rescue failing projects. Our reputation was built on delivering results. We could sell that. We spent the next hour brainstorming, the anxiety melting away, replaced by the thrill of a new challenge. And then my phone buzzed. It was a text from a guy I knew in the marketing department back at the old company. I opened it. "Dude, what the hell happened? The entire engineering team just quit? Rumors are flying." I showed the text to the others. Herman just chuckled. "It's starting." I typed a quick reply. Something like that. Long story. Before I could even put my phone down, it buzzed again. A different guy, this time from sales. "Is it true about Bernard and all of you? You need to tell me. We have a huge client demo tomorrow morning for the new project." The new project? The one Bernard had warned them about. I showed the message to the table. The QA engineer winced. "Oh, that demo is going to be a train wreck. The staging environment was a mess even when we were there." We all had a dark little laugh about that. Over the next half hour, it was like a floodgate had opened. All our phones started buzzing, texts and missed calls from former colleagues. "The internal services are getting slow. Did you guys change something before you left? Hey, the build server is throwing a bunch of errors I've never seen before. Any idea what's going on? Angela is walking around telling everyone that you were all part of a restructuring. Nobody believes her." It was a real-time feed of a system beginning to crumble. We weren't even actively doing anything. This was just the natural state of things without the constant quiet maintenance that our team, and especially Bernard, had been providing. The systems were like a complex machine that needed a skilled mechanic just to keep it running smoothly. They had just fired the entire mechanic crew. The best message came from a project manager I was friendly with. "The CEO just held an emergency all-hands meeting. He and Angela announced you all chose to pursue other opportunities. Then he said they have a robust plan to transition the work." Angela then tried to give a speech about positive renewal, and someone in the back of the room literally laughed out loud. The panic here is insane. We felt a certain grim satisfaction reading these messages. It wasn't just that we were right. It was that they were so wrong, so publicly, and so immediately. Their perfect corporate world was colliding with cold, hard reality. And reality was winning. We ordered another round of beers and started talking about our new venture in more concrete terms. Herman would handle the business side. Bernard would be our chief architect. The rest of us would be founding engineers. We sketched out a business plan on a napkin. It felt real. It felt possible. It was around 7 p.m. when the first truly desperate call came in. It was Herman's phone. He looked at the caller ID and his expression hardened. "It's the CEO," he said to us. He put his finger to his lips, signaling for us to be quiet, and then answered, putting the call on speaker. "Hello?" Herman's voice was flat, professional. "Herman, thank God I reached you." The CEO's voice was strained, high-pitched with panic. "Listen, we have a major problem." "Oh?" Herman said, taking a calm sip of his beer. "Our entire production database is locked up. Nothing is working. E-commerce is down. Client portals are down. We're losing money every second. Nobody here knows what to do." I looked at the other senior dev. We both knew what it was. It was a complex custom security script that Bernard had written. It performed an automated security check and lockdown if it detected certain anomalies. It required a manual override from a specific terminal with specific credentials that only Bernard and maybe 2 other people knew. It was a failsafe to prevent data breaches. It was also a ticking time bomb for anyone who didn't know it existed. "That's a shame," Herman said, his voice devoid of sympathy. "Herman, please," the CEO begged. "I know things ended badly, but I need your help. I need Bernard's help. Can you just tell us how to fix it? Just this once. I'll authorize a generous freelance payment. Name your price." Name our price. A few hours ago, they had treated Bernard like he was worthless. Now, he was priceless. Herman looked around the table at all of us. We all just shook our heads. A silent, unanimous no. Herman turned his attention back to the phone. "I'm sorry," he said, and he sounded like he meant it. "But we no longer work for you. We are not your on-call tech support. That is your problem to solve now." The CEO was sputtering. But nobody here knows how. You can't just leave us like this." "You made a decision this afternoon." Herman's voice was like ice. "You decided that our culture fit was more important than our competence. You decided that Bernard's contribution was a liability. It seems you're now experiencing the consequences of that decision. I suggest you consult your director of people and culture. I'm sure she has a holistic and inclusive solution for a database kernel panic." And with that, he hung up. The whole booth erupted. We were cheering, laughing. It was a perfect crushing shutdown. The satisfaction was immense. It wasn't about the money. It was about the principle. They didn't want us. Now they needed us. And they couldn't have us. The story of what happened next came to us in pieces over the following days, from former colleagues who were jumping ship, from industry gossip, from the glorious, glorious reviews that started appearing on the company's Glassdoor page. The database issue took them 12 hours to resolve. They had to call in an emergency team of outside consultants who charged them an astronomical fee, and even then, they only managed to bypass the lockdown, not actually fix the underlying anomaly. The client demo for the new project was a complete catastrophe. Without us there to prep the environment, it was riddled with bugs. The whole thing crashed halfway through. The client was furious and put the multi-million-dollar contract under review. The day-to-day work ground to a halt. The remaining junior developers were completely overwhelmed. The bug count soared. The system became slow and unreliable. Angela apparently tried to fix the problem by holding more meetings. She organized emotional support circles for the stressed-out developers. She brought in a yoga instructor to promote wellness. She was trying to solve a catastrophic engineering failure with HR initiatives. It was like trying to put out a house fire with a scented candle. The Glassdoor reviews were the public face of the disaster. Someone, probably the junior dev we left behind, posted a detailed, anonymous account of what happened. Management fired the linchpin engineer of the entire company for not being bubbly enough. The entire senior team walked out in protest. The platform is now in constant failure mode. Avoid this place like the plague unless you enjoy watching a dumpster fire. That review got dozens of helpful votes. Then another one appeared. The new HR director has a degree in something useless and thinks she knows more about software engineering than the people who write the code. She values feelings over function, which is why nothing functions anymore. She single-handedly destroyed the best department in the company out of pure ideological arrogance. The company's rating on the site plummeted. Recruiting became impossible. No sane engineer would want to walk into that situation. About 2 weeks after our mass resignation, the final shoe dropped. The big client officially pulled their contract. It was a huge blow, representing a significant chunk of the company's annual revenue. The CEO had to answer to the board of directors. He did what all cowards do. He looked for a scapegoat, and there was only one logical choice. Angela was fired. We heard she was escorted out of the building by the same security guard who had escorted Bernard. The irony was delicious. Her reign of terror had lasted only a few months, but the damage she had caused would take years to repair, if ever. She had tried to build her corporate utopia, but she had built it on a foundation of sand, and the first tide of reality had washed it all away. As for us, we took a week off to decompress, then we got to work. Herman handled the legal paperwork and incorporated our new company, Bedrock Solutions, a name suggested by Bernard himself. It was perfect. We pooled some of our savings to get started. We didn't need a fancy office. We all worked from home. Our first client was a company Herman knew from a previous job. They had a project that was 6 months behind schedule and wildly over budget. They hired us to see if we could salvage it. We had a kickoff call with them. Herman laid out our terms. No HR-mandated meetings, no buzzwords. We would be judged on one thing and one thing only: results. They agreed. They were desperate. Bernard took one look at their code and architecture. He spent a weekend quietly refactoring the entire core of their system. The rest of us then descended on it, cleaning up, fixing bugs, and implementing the features they actually needed. In 1 month, we accomplished what their previous team hadn't been able to do in a year. We delivered the project ahead of our own schedule and under their revised budget. They were ecstatic. They paid our invoice without question and immediately signed us to a long-term retainer contract. Bedrock Solutions was profitable in its first month of operation. Word got around. Our reputation grew. We were the team you called when you had an impossible problem, the team that could fix anything. We never had to advertise. The work just came to us. We hired a few more people, carefully. People who shared our values of competence and respect. Today, our little company is thriving. We're all making more money than we ever did at the old place. More importantly, we're doing it on our own terms. We have a culture, but it's not one that was designed in a PowerPoint presentation. Our culture is simple: do good work, respect the people who do it. Bernard is our technical lead. He's still quiet. But now, his silence isn't seen as a problem to be solved. It's seen as what it is: the sound of a brilliant mind at work. Every now and then, I look up the old company on Glassdoor. It's a ghost town. Most of the good people left. The product is stagnant. The reviews are still terrible. Angela's name pops up on LinkedIn sometimes. She's bounced around a few short-term contract gigs. It seems her reputation followed her. We made the right choice that day in the conference room. We didn't just stand up for a friend. We stood up for an idea. The idea that what you do is more important than how you talk about it, that competence matters, that loyalty matters, and that when a system becomes so broken that it punishes its most valuable people, the only winning move is not to play.